Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna. You're watching A News. Let's see the headlines. Iran and Oman have agreed on a route map for ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. The death toll following a powerful magnitude 7.7 earthquake in Indonesia has risen to 51. And Russia and Ukraine continue to trade overnight strikes with casualties reported on both sides. Iran says it has reached an agreement with Oman on Saturday on a new shipping route map for the Strait of Hormuz following weeks of technical negotiations. The talks began 3 months ago after Tehran and Muscat signed a memorandum of understanding on June the 18th. Sources say the proposed 60-day deal would split Hormuz traffic with inbound ships using Iranian waters and outbound vessels travelling through Omani waters. Iran stressed that the arrangement is an independent agreement between the two coastal states aimed at ensuring safe passage while respecting their sovereignty. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said on Saturday that the instability in the Strait of Hormuz is the direct result of what he describes as illegal action by the United States and Israel. Ismail Baghai said the strait remained open and faced no problems until the 28th of February, when the United States and Israel launched military attacks against Iran. He also accused Washington of imposing a naval blockade, calling it an act of aggression under international law. Baghai said continued US threats and what Iran describes as violations of the Memorandum of Understanding to end the war mean that security in the Strait of Hormuz has yet to be restored.
The United States continues to speak with pride about implementing a naval blockade against Iran. This is an admission of an aggressive act against Iran. According to international law, this is an act of aggression. Its threats continue, and other violations of the Memorandum of Understanding to end the war continue. Well, in these circumstances, we naturally cannot say that security and safety are established in the Strait of Hormuz.
Iran is asking Qatar to allow an Iranian team into the country to investigate the fate of 3 military pilots Tehran says were captured after their aircraft was shot down in Qatar in March. Iranian military official Mohammad Bakirzadeh also accused Kuwait of withholding information about 4 other Iranians detained there. Qatar says its rescue teams found the remains of 1 pilot after an Iranian aircraft violated Qatari airspace and failed to respond to attempts to contact them. Doha says it contacted Tehran to coordinate the handover of the remains and invited Iranian officials to review details of its rescue operation, but says it received no response. At least 11 people have been killed, including 3 children and 19 others injured following an Israeli airstrike in southern Lebanon. The heaviest strike hit the village of Ansar, with a separate strike on Deir el-Zahrani killing 4 people. The Israeli military said the strikes targeted Hezbollah infrastructure and were in response to a Hezbollah attack on Israeli troops. Hezbollah, however, has vowed to respond to the Israeli strikes. The two sides continue to accuse each other of violating the ceasefire. Hamas political chief Khalil al-Hayya is heading to Cairo with a delegation. The group will meet Egyptian officials to discuss the Gaza ceasefire deal. The visit comes ahead of a regional trip by US President Donald Trump's envoy Jared Kushner, who will travel to Israel and Egypt next week to discuss differences over the Gaza plan. The plan calls for Hamas to hand over its weapons and for Israeli forces to withdraw gradually from Gaza. This marks the first time al-Hayya will visit Egypt since taking over as Hamas leader. Mutual drone and missile attacks were reported between Russia and Ukraine overnight. 3 people were injured in a strike on Kyiv, while deaths and injuries were also reported following Ukrainian drone attacks on several Russian regions. Both sides also said fighting continued along the front line.
Mutual attacks between Russia and Ukraine continued overnight. 3 people were injured in a Russian attack on Kyiv. Explosions were reported in several parts of the capital. Some buildings also caught fire. 4 powerful explosions were heard in central Kyiv, while 6 more explosions were reported in the Pechersky district within 3 minutes. A commercial building caught fire in the Obolonsky district. Another building was also set ablaze in the Holosivsky district. Ukraine's Air Force issued 2 warnings overnight about the threat of a ballistic missile attack. Meanwhile, Ukrainian drones attacked the Moscow region overnight. Regional Governor Andrei Vorobyov described it as one of the largest attacks on the region. An 83-year-old man was killed in Podolsk, while several other people were injured. A Wildberries warehouse was also damaged in the attack. Ukraine has targeted Wildberries facilities in recent weeks, accusing the company of transporting military-related goods. Firefighters and emergency workers were at the scene on Sunday. According to the governor, several facilities were also damaged in Domodedovo. The city is located near one of Moscow's main airports. Russia's defense ministry said 822 Ukrainian drones had been shot down across the country. Kyiv says the attacks are aimed at damaging economic infrastructure that supports Russia's military operations. A drone attack was also reported in Moscow Oblast. 2 people were injured, including a 9-year-old boy who is said to be in serious condition. The Ukrainian side said 233 combat engagements had taken place along the front line over the past 24 hours. Ukrainian forces reportedly repelled Russian attacks in several directions. Russia's defense ministry, meanwhile, said its forces had taken control of another settlement in Zaporizhzhia Oblast. According to the ministry, Russian forces struck Ukrainian logistics centers, energy facilities, transport infrastructure, and drone production sites. Mutual missile and drone attacks between the 2 sides continue.
Romania's defense ministry says the Spanish F-18 fighter jet on a NATO air policing mission shot down a drone after it entered Romanian airspace illegally on Sunday. The ministry did not identify the drone's origin, but said radar detected it entering Romania from neighbouring Moldova. Romania, which borders Ukraine, has experienced repeated airspace incursions by Russian drones over the past 4 years, as well as mines drifting through the Black Sea along the key trade and energy routes. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for closer cooperation with UNESCO and other international organizations. He said more Ukrainian cultural heritage sites should be added to the UNESCO World Heritage List. Zelensky spoke at a ceremony marking the 975th anniversary of the Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra. He said Ukraine's historic sites need more protection and restoration. This includes sites in Russian-occupied areas. UNESCO Director General Khaled El-Enani also visited the Lavra and expressed UNESCO's support for protecting and restoring the historic site. Lavra was damaged by a Russian strike in June. UNESCO has provided $100,000 for urgent restoration work. Switzerland will provide another $732,000 through UNESCO.
We need more cooperation with UNESCO and other global institutions that protect humanity and culture. More of our Ukrainian shrines deserve to become part of the UNESCO World Heritage and receive appropriate attention, protection and opportunities for restoration.
The death toll following a powerful magnitude 7.7 earthquake in eastern Indonesia has risen to 51. The quake hit East Nusa Tenggara province, with Flores Island among the worst affected areas. Rescue teams are continuing operations as authorities assess the scale of the destruction.
Rescue workers sifted through collapsed buildings and landslide debris on Sunday, searching for bodies and possible survivors a day after the powerful earthquake. Officials from Indonesia's disaster agency said more than 900 homes were destroyed and another 450 damaged, forcing around 5,000 residents into emergency shelters. At least 167 public facilities, including schools, healthcare centers, and churches, were also damaged. Near the epicenter, medical and military personnel treated injured survivors in makeshift tents after the local hospital was heavily damaged. For survivors, the earthquake struck without warning, leaving little time to escape.
When it shook, I felt I was spinning. I didn't have the chance to get up. Just as I was about to get up, rocks fell on me, on my head, my legs. I had my 2 kids with me, and we were all buried under rubble. We were then evacuated by someone.
Another survivor described being trapped inside her room as the building collapsed around her.
I just woke up, and when the quake happened, my entire room started collapsing, and I was trapped in my room. I focused on covering my head, so my legs and body were crushed by the quake. Only when it was safe was I able to crawl out.
Emergency teams continued searching for villagers feared trapped beneath earthquake-triggered landslides across 6 regencies on Flores, a predominantly Catholic island in Muslim-majority Indonesia. Aid workers began distributing rice, ready-to-eat meals, drinking water, blankets, and medical supplies, while emergency shelters were set up for people who lost their homes. Restoring electricity and communications, as well as reaching remote communities cut off by landslides, remained among the main challenges for authorities. The European Union has expressed solidarity with Indonesia and said it is ready to support search and rescue efforts. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the EU was prepared to activate the Copernicus Earth Observation Service, providing satellite data to help Indonesian authorities assess the damage and direct rescue teams to areas most in need.
Staying on Indonesia, survivors of Saturday's powerful earthquake are still waiting for aid, as thousands remain displaced across the worst-hit areas of East Nusa Tenggara. For some families, reaching safety was only the first challenge.
When the magnitude 7.7 earthquake struck Sika in Indonesia's East Nusa Tenggara province, Abdul Mutas rushed at least 7 members of his family up a hill to a plantation they own, fleeing a tsunami warning. Now, the 63-year-old man and his family are still sheltering there, with elderly relatives among them, waiting for aid to arrive. The family says they have little food and only the clothes they were wearing when they fled. Abdul says neither his family nor others in the area have received assistance, and he blames the authorities for the situation.
The authorities are letting us remain here. They told us to gather our documents, family cards, told us they'd go there, government office, for aid. I just want to know if we're supposed to stay in camps like these, or if the government have better plans.
For Abdul's family, returning home is not yet an option. Their house remains standing, but they say they can only check on it occasionally while continuing to shelter on higher ground.
We haven't gone home. We just checked our house from time to time, but we came here only with clothes on our backs and bits of food so we can still eat.
Indonesia's East Nusa Tenggara provincial government has declared a 14-day emergency response status. Authorities say the move is aimed at facilitating disaster response, evacuation, relief distribution, and recovery efforts in affected areas.
Communities in Colombia are beginning the long process of rebuilding, with volunteers and emergency teams clearing debris from streets and assessing damage to homes and historic buildings.
5 days after a powerful earthquake devastated Western Colombia, residents are helping to restore some of the hardest hit communities. In Cali, volunteers armed with brooms and shovels worked alongside municipal teams and heavy machinery to clear debris from streets and public spaces. The operation is part of a citywide initiative
coordinating volunteer brigades throughout affected neighbourhoods.
We are going to enter a stage of recovery and restoration. We are going through grief that overwhelms us all. However, this situation has made us draw more strength and has allowed us to show the world, to show Colombia and Cali is all of us. That is our activity, a cleaning activity, collecting rubble, because although we are going through a tragedy, this tragedy is going to unite us.
Recovery operations are also continuing in Pereira, where excavators are removing rubble as emergency teams assess damaged buildings. President Abelardo de la Espriella has pledged rental assistance for displaced families and the reconstruction of homes, schools, hospitals and government buildings. According to Colombia's National Unit for Disaster Risk Management, at least 285 people were killed, nearly 4,000 injured, and hundreds remain missing.
Countries across Europe continue to battle wildfires that have forced thousands of people to flee their homes. This comes as the European Union and Australia offer assistance in efforts to contain the blazes.
Wildfires have remained a major issue across Europe as countries battle blazes that have displaced thousands of people. Belgium tackled its largest wildfire on record on Saturday, with army firefighting vehicles deployed and assistance provided by the European Union and neighbouring Germany and Luxembourg. The bloc deployed 3 helicopters and 2 water bomber aircraft to tackle the blaze in the east of the country, which has been burning since Friday. Meanwhile, in western Germany, more than 2,000 people were evacuated from the village of Gay as fires spread across 300 hectares, or roughly the equivalent of 400 football fields.
This is the first time we've experienced a major fire of this kind here, but it's certainly not the first time we've experienced these extreme weather conditions, and that is also linked to climate change. No one is seriously going to deny that any longer. A few weeks ago, the heat was the dominant topic. Now it's the drought combined with the heat.
In Croatia, at least 1 person has died and 40 others have been injured after a blaze driven by strong winds descended on the tourist town of Omis on Friday. Officials say the fires engulfed 1,000 hectares, with some people forced to jump into the sea from boats to escape the flames. Meanwhile, an Australian helicopter was deployed to a wildfire in southwestern France on Saturday, as authorities continued efforts to bring the blaze under control. Authorities say 650 people were evacuated from the villages of Luglon and Garen, while hundreds of firefighters were involved in efforts to contain the blaze. Record-breaking heat and drought, which scientists say are linked to climate change, have increased the risk of wildfires across Europe this summer.
At least 12 people were killed and 10 others seriously injured after a Polish-registered bus overturned on a motorway in eastern Hungary early Sunday. Officers believe the driver fell asleep at the wheel. He has been taken into custody. 35 out of the 57 passengers and 2 drivers on board have been rescued by firefighters so far. According to state media, cranes were dispatched to move the 24-ton bus to help rescue those trapped underneath. Polish Foreign Ministry said that all of the people on the bus were Polish citizens. Ugandan sugar manufacturers are protesting a heavy 300% tax imposed by Kenya on imported sugar. The Uganda Sugar Manufacturers Association says the move threatens to lock them out of one of its biggest regional markets.
Millers in Uganda are stuck with tons of sugar in their stores. Shipments of sugar to Uganda's biggest regional market have dropped significantly due to massive taxes imposed by the Kenyan government. Ugandan producers say Kenya's decision to protect its domestic sugar industry risks East Africa's free trade deals.
That means we have a lot of surplus stock in our stores. This hike of this excise duty affects our production. It has reduced our production across Ugandan sugar mills due to the this diminished market.
The impact is being felt down to the growers. Cane is now drying up in the fields because not much is being bought by the millers, severely affecting the livelihoods of smallholder farmers.
Sugarcane matures after 18 months, and the miller then gives you a permit to harvest immediately. But you can imagine the cane growing and staying in the field for even 40 months. That means you have incurred heavy losses because when it overstays, it just dries up.
Ugandan producers are now threatening to take the dispute to the East African Court of Justice if it's not resolved quickly. Uganda's Trade Ministry says talks with Kenya are ongoing and show promising results.
We should not be worried as a nation, as investors that are investing in this country. We promise that we will continue engaging our regional partners. This is not a simple task because while we are protecting our domestic agricultural produce and industrial produce, we must make sure that we grow our exports.
Uganda produces about 700,000 metric tons of sugar every year and consumes just about half of it, leaving the surplus for export. Sugar is one of the country's top agricultural exports, and occasional blockades from Kenya and Tanzania have increasingly strained cross-border trade.
Businesses in Tanzania can now settle payments to firms in China directly in Chinese yuan without having to go through a third currency, often the US dollar. The country now has access to China's cross-border interbank payment system, or CIPS.
A new payment option is opening another channel for trade between Tanzania and China. China's cross-border payment system, also known as CIPS, allows banks to settle transactions directly in yuan, reducing reliance on other currencies. For Chinese businessman Wang Xing, who has lived in Tanzania for 6 years, the move could ease some challenges faced by importers.
The biggest challenge we're facing in the financial market right now is the foreign exchange in Tanzania. Because of the intervention of the US dollar, the cost of exchanging the RMB is relatively high, and there is often a shortage of foreign exchange in the market. So we hope that the bank can give us more support.
Facilitating the transactions in Tanzania is Stanbic Bank, which has also expanded access to CIPS to other African markets. For Tanzanian officials, they see greater use of the yuan as another way to support growing economic ties with China.
We confidently foresee that our economic exchange will experience a significant upward trajectory, particularly now that China has fully implemented its landmark 100% zero tariff treatment policy for Tanzania, effective 1st of May 2026.
The central bank, Tanzania's financial regulator, says in addition to supporting CIPS, it is working to strengthen other regional and continental payment systems. But it says the expansion of digital cross-border payments must go hand in hand with stronger safeguards.
As these services expand, attention must remain focused on anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing controls, cybersecurity resilience, consumer protection, and prudent risk management.
The introduction of CIPS comes as trade between Tanzania and China continues to grow, with bilateral trade reaching more than $11 billion last year, a 27% increase from the previous year. China remains a major source of Tanzanian imports, including machinery, electronics, construction equipment, and other industrial goods.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Egypt could become the latest country to join a new defense pact between Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Speaking to Al Jazeera, Erdogan described Cairo's accession as possible and said the pact remains open to additional members. Known as the Mecca Joint Defence Agreement, the pact requires its members to respond collectively if any signatory faces an external attack. And that's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for all the latest updates.